guys, welcome to this video. I'm so happy that I'm finally able to share this information with you, how to pass CSEC Spanish in 6 months. This is a two-part video for Espanol, and in this one we are going to concentrate on what you should do for writing and language. So what this basically means is this is what you should concentrate on for kind of overall grammar practice, general grammar practice, as well as preparing for paper two. And again, some of the stuff that you use for paper two, it also goes in paper one and it goes into your orals, but primarily it's practice for paper two. All right. So, what are some of the things we're going to cover? The general aims of the exam, how to study for Spanish. Then I'm going to go through months 1 to 6, and then I'm going to say hasta luego. Yeah. Right. So, a lot of people keep thinking of the exam in terms of, oh, paper two, I have to do this. Paper one, I have to do this. Orals, I have to do this. But what I want you to start thinking of is thinking of your exam in terms of the actual language skills. These are the basic language skills for any language. All right. So we have reading, writing, listening, speaking. This is what you're supposed to be doing in Spanish. All right. Even if you're listening to this and you're not in form 4 or 5 as yet, these are the things you're supposed to be working on. If you have a really good Spanish teacher, he or she is working on these exact skills. All right. So this is what you're supposed to be focusing on so that you can study for the exam. All right. These are your core areas. If you focus on these, you will improve. And how do you break this down? You break this down into grammar, you break down this into vocabulary, but ultimately it means practicing. It means practicing. I think for some people, you might hear me say practice so much, you think it's my favorite word, but that's what it really is about. Okay, so I'm going to go into month one immediately. Again, these are guidelines. All right, these are general guidelines to get you on the right path for the exam in 6 months. And this is the exact process that I tend to use with my students for Spanish. This is the process I'm definitely going to be using when my 6 month Spanish class, my 6 month process begins in July. All right, July 2023. So that will be for people who are writing in Jan or writing in May, June 2024. All right. I apologize, persons who are writing in 2023. However, the information in this video can benefit you still. It will give you some sort of direction. All right. So the first thing you want to look at in month one, whatever your month one is, you want to look at the different parts of speech. All right. A lot of people get confused in knowing, in terms of knowing what's a verb, what's a noun, what's an adjective. If you can sort out those three basic categories, you will be on your way to not losing your sanity. What you also need as well to recognize would be some of the pronouns, some of the determiners as well. Determiners meaning el and la, un y una, all right? But if you can get nouns, verbs, and adjectives, sustantivos, verbos, y adjetivos, then you're on your way, all right? Then in terms of vocabulary, you want to do daily routine, all right? You want to know what things, or especially verbs, daily routine can involve a lot of verbs, things that you do on a daily basis. Levantarse, comer, ir a la escuela. You want daily routine tasks, right? Things you do every day, things you do in your regular life, right? In terms of grammar, I like to focus on verbs a lot because I think for many students, the verbs feel very different. I work on the present tenses. All right. To give you clarity, present tense, it would be simple present tense and present continuous tense. You need to understand the distinction between these two because they're used differently in Espanol, very, very differently, right? In English, we love to use present continuous tense. We use it a lot, right? Some of our expressions will sound weird if we use present simple tense instead of present continuous. In Espanol, it's weird to use present continuous tense, all right? And even I have some students right now who are lapsing into present continuous tense because of their English. They have so much English in their head still, and it sounds so weird in Spanish. No suena bien, right? Also, I recommend start getting the top 100 regular verbs. It's a list that I have compiled for my students. Regular verbs, listen, you can even Google a regular verbs list. Eventually, I'm going to have it available for any student, okay, that you can come onto my website and download it. But for now, you just want to learn regular verbs. Why? Because regular verbs do not misbehave. When I say do not misbehave, they tend to stick to the pattern that they've been given, right? So regular verbs help you stick to that pattern. All right. That's the benefit of regular verbs. Okay. So if you know your regular verbs, that means you can do your present tense, your past tenses, and stuff like that. You've made it easier for yourself. And in terms of actual writing practice slash reading practice slash paper two skill practice, you want to do reading comprehension. All right. You want to do the reading comprehensions that come in paper two. I'll let you know what my hack is for reading comprehension. I make my students read them out loud. Okay, so if you're obviously going to use it for your deciphering skills, your comprehension skills, but you can actually use it to practice for orals. Although this is not the orals video, trust me, you can use this to practice for oral. So guys, this is month one. And in month two, you'll notice that we're going to start a pattern. All right. So for month two, we're going to do vocabulary again, and this time home and family. Things that are in your house, cosas en la casa y los miembros de la familia. So things in your house and members of your family, los miembros de la familia. And you've got to build your vocabulary. You cannot pretend that you cannot build your vocabulary. You have to have vocabulario. Es muy importante. All right. So you've got to build your vocabulary. And this is how we're doing it every month in a very focused manner. So home and family, grammar wise, in terms of the tenses, we're focusing on future tenses. All right. I have future tenses here. I'll tell you what I call future tenses. Is the actual future tense, which I think is absolutely gorgeous. It's one of the easiest tenses to form. One, that's why I do it so early. Secondly, even the regular ones in future tense are kind of cool. I know I'm saying they're kind of cool, but their formation is not that complex. Once you know what the stem looks like, it's very easy to add the endings because the endings are actually regular. It's really fascinating. Yeah, they're regular. Yes, they are regular. So we have future tense and then we have conditional tense. I often do conditional tenses with future tenses because their formation pattern is very, very similar. Very, very similar. So they tend to be very, very easy to learn. What you'll have some work in terms of doing is to actually assimilate using a conditional tense. That's what you're going to have put some work into doing, right? But they are very helpful and they can be very, very impressive for the exam, even for the orals exam, right? This month we'll be doing reading comprehension again because we need to get those points in. I'm saying points because sorry about that noise. I'm saying points because I give my primary school students points, but you want to get your practice in. That's what you want to do. So reading comprehension again, and then we start letter writing. Now I know you don't like letter writing. However, there's a process and it's not that bad. Okay, so if you get the process, you're going to have an easier life. Okay, so we have to do it for the exam anyway, so you might as well start it. And then in month three, you're gonna continue with letter writing because again, we need to improve. All right. If you notice vocabulary, this time is school and career, right? School and career. So, cosas en la clase y cosas con respecto a la carrera. So, you're going to do things that are related to career. You're going to do things that are related to school. All right. Then we're going to do past tenses. Yeah, you see this one, you'll have to really get this one in your head, right? If you remember, I said month one, we have this little discrepancy with the present tenses, right? The discrepancy is even bigger with past tenses. Spanish has two, dos tiempos pasados. All right, they've got two past tenses, and you've really got to understand how they work because they are used. very specifically in Espanol. So this is a month where you really want to get those tenses in your head. What I normally recommend is starting with pretrit, because pretrit tense is very similar to what we already have in English, and then trying to get the imperfect inside. All right. It takes some time. Don't be upset with yourself. All right. Learning a foreign language is a mental process. It's a mindset game. So you have to understand you are going to make mistakes, especially if you've never been around Spanish speakers. All right. I grew up with Spanish and I was never around Spanish speakers, right? I actually wish I were I wish I could be around Spanish speakers a lot more right now. I wish I was in Puerto Rico or Ecuador, living in El Salvador, right? Living right now in España, but I'm not. I'm in Trinidad and Tobago, right? We do have a lot of Spanish speakers here, but I'm still not in an actual Spanish speaking environment. I'm more in an environment where I'm helping persons learn Espanol, right? So it's very different. Then in month 3, we want to make sure we start learning our basic irregular verbs. So we already had um, the top 100 regular verbs in month 1. Please don't think that you were just learning them in month 1 and ignoring them in month 2. Whatever you do in month 1, you kind of have to keep working at it in month 2, especially if it's vocabulary. You can't stop with vocabulary. All right. Month 3, we're going to start incorporating some of the irregular verbs. Now, you probably should have encountered some of them already. Some basic ones are ser y estar, también tener y querer, saber, hacer, ver, right? Those are some really basic ones, all right, that you should have already absorbed, especially that ser y estar y tener y querer, right? You want to know those, right? But here you're going to dive even deeper, and probably I normally try to dive more in depth into like radically changing verbs as well. Reflexive verbs to a certain degree. I like to do all of that when I do my irregular verbs. They are not necessarily irregular verbs, but they have so many little quirks and peculiar variations. I sometimes like to do them all together, especially for a course of this type. All right. Month 4, vocab sports and recreation. Right. So normally I always say this is a topic that I'm not a fan of, especially the sports side, because I'm not a sports person. Right. And if you're for any of these topics, if you feel like, this topic is not me, I still encourage you to learn them. It's still good. You still need to know basic words, because you may get a passage, like for example, you may get a passage for reading comprehension, and it's talking about maybe a sporting event. You need to know the words, the terms for deporte, baloncesto, béisbol, ¿qué más? Deportista. You need to know those words, right? It's just going to benefit you overall. These are basic general words. All the categories that you get for these are actually all these categories you see here for vocabulary are actually categories that I took from the orals exam. Right? If you're familiar with the orals exam, these are the topics that come. And ultimately, these are just like basic areas of daily life. That's the point of this exam. You are learning basic Spanish to the point where you should be able to go out and speak to a native and talk about everyday life, because everyday life is simple stuff. Más o menos, more or less, right? Then in month 4, I also did the imperative, commands. I love commands. Commands are really important. Commands are used a lot in Espanol, and you may not always need them for writing, but you'll probably need them for situations. So when I say you may not need them for writing, you may not need them for the contextual dialogue too much, or you may not need them for letter writing, but certainly you'll need to understand a command when you see one, like in reading comprehension, or you may need it for situations. All right. And if you notice, again, we're doing irregular verbs. So I do the basic ones in month 3. I didn't specify that. I apologize. I do the basic ones, like I mentioned, and then I do my top 100 list. To be honest, that top 100 list of irregular verbs, it's extra information. You may not need all of them. I often tell students they could go into the exam with the top 100 regular verbs alone, And when I say alone, I mean in terms of verbs, not nouns, just in terms of verbs. But they can walk into the exam with the top 100 regular verbs, and they should be, and they're basic irregular verbs, and they should be able to make their way through if they're determined and skillful. However, again, as much information as we get, it benefits us. So we don't wanna throw away wisdom, right? And of course, we're going to start on situations. Situations are tricky. A lot of people get confused with situations. It's really important to practice situations and understand how to respond to them in terms of strategy. That's why for each of these questions that come for paper two, you will see that I do it 1 month and practice it again because the strategy is really, really important. That's something that gets missed. The strategy, the purpose behind actually responding in a particular way because you're in an exam. All right. Real life, this is not real life Spanish here. Es un examen, es una prueba. All right. No es la vida real, no es la vida actual. All right. So you've got to be prepared. ¿Me entiendes? Espero que es así. Good. So month 5, travel. I love travel, by the way, but you really want to get your vocab for travel, right? So things like pasaporte, ¿qué más? El destino, los países. I recommend you know the names of some Spanish speaking countries and learn to pronounce them in Spanish. Just saying, this is a really good pointer. Because we're so used to saying these things in English, we pronounce them wrong. Like people say, oh, I'm from Trinidad and Tobago, so Puerto Rico. I think most English people say Puerto Rico, right? Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico. Es Puerto Rico. Bueno. Right? We're also going to do subjunctive in month 5. Subjunctive is really important. It's not traumatic. It's not traumatic. And for CSEC, you do basic subjunctive. When I say basic, you learn the basic triggers. Subjunctive can get very, very complex, but we want to learn the basic situations in which you would use subjunctive. And quite frankly, understanding how to form it is very, very simple as well. So we'll go into that. And as I said, situations part 2. El segundo par, el segundo, la segunda parte. That sounded weird. I'm sorry if I mixed up my um gender there. And then we do dialogue part 1. All right. So I love contextual dialogue. I think it's really, really tricky. A lot of people say letter is the trickiest. I think dialogue is the trickiest. I think dialogue is the trickiest because you have to be mindful of what's being said on the other side. So your responses have to match the your replies have to match the responses. I hope that makes sense. If you don't know what I'm talking about, please get a paper too and take a look at it. And you may have to look at the video again so that it makes more sense to you. But those are important, right? Oh, that should be dialogue part 2. Yeah. And in the last month, what I do is shopping and present subjunctive again, and I do situations and dialogue. All right. So this is what you want to focus on in 6 months, right? Actually, I think there's a typo here. I did a typo. There was a typo, I think, in my English video too, and apparently I did the same thing for Spanish because it's situations, all right, dialogue, right? So I think in month 6, it's not just situations again. It's going to be like a review of the papers. And as I would have said, you don't learn something in 1 month and stop. That's not helpful to you. And that's not going to benefit you for the exam. All right. So I hope this video was actually helpful. You can always comment or contribute your opinions and let me know. If it is your writing exams in less than 6 months, you can still use the nuggets in this video, the tactics in this video, the tips to go ahead and form your own study strategy. All right. At this point in time, if you have exams in 3 months, you should be doing past papers. If you have the time and you're writing next year, you're writing in January or May, June in the following year, then that means you actually have time to start working on these things. Languages are living things and they require practice. So you don't have to wait for a particular point in time to begin studying. You can study right now. In fact, my most impressive students for Spanish are not only those who actually put all the work in the limited space of time, they're the ones who began working on Spanish before they even met me, right? The ones who started just connecting with friends on social media to improve their Spanish and just began speaking Espanol, or the ones who are so determined that they have everything in Spanish. Their phones in Spanish, they respond to people in Spanish, they listen to Spanish music, they receive Spanish news. So you have to bring Spanish into your environment in order to improve your skills. Again, if this was helpful, all you have to do is comment below and of course share this video to someone who needs it.